Are there any immediate questions to Antoinette? All right. So we move on to our final speaker, Evgeny Morozov. Evgeny is a prolific essayist and vocal critic of what was once called here at Transmediale in other circles the Californian ideology, which he now calls, or parts of that, solutionism, most notably in his most recent book 2 years ago, To Save Everything, Click Here. Originally from Belarus, Evgeny is currently living in the US, in Boston, and at the moment he's a fellow of the American Academy here in Berlin. So please welcome Evgeny Morozov.
Thank you so much. I think I'll be brief and probably vulgar. Let me start by expressing some skepticism about the utility of actually us talking about algorithms today. In as much as you accept the premise that there is something called algorithmic ideology or big data ideology, I'm extremely skeptical that there is any value in trying to debunk it. And I think there is very little value in trying to debunk it for the sole reason that the people implementing a specific project based on that ideology are not acting in good faith. They're not driven by any kind of Habermasian force of the better argument. There is no way you're going to go and explain to them that if only they had read more Deleuze or Foucault, they would design better algorithms or databases. I think that premise we have to take off the table for the sole reason that the reason why we see more and more algorithms, sensors, databases, big data all around us has to do with the structural conditions and crises within financialized capitalism, and not so much with some profound ontological confusion that these people have about algorithms or big data. So if you actually go and look at the deployment of them in fields like policing or healthcare, or education, or terrorism fighting, you'll see that they're all some kind of temporary wolves. You know, they're all a way to keep the system running while the system would otherwise collapse. So if you look at policing and the use of algorithms for predictive policing, I mean, the reason why they're being used there is very simple, is because discontent is otherwise would be overflowing, and you'll actually see much more protest, and you'll see much more nested things happening. So of course they're drawing on whatever data they can for preemptive purposes to prevent whatever discontent from brewing up. I mean, if you look at the use of big data by New York City's fire department, the reason why they're using big data to predict the fires are going to happen next is partly because they don't have the resources to hire fire inspectors. That has to do with the structural transformation of how our cities operate, and has to do with the fact that they're basically losing the money that they had before, right? And I just don't think that we can go and talk to them and tell them, look, guys, you're sort of working with a very bad model of causality here because you're relying on big data. Why don't you do something else instead? I mean, that's not going to happen. They're going to continue doing that, just like police are going to continue using algorithms for predictive policing. The same, I would argue, applies across the board. If you look at healthcare, the reason why we are encouraged and actually incentivized with specific interventions at the policy level to engage in more and more self-tracking when it comes to health has to do with the fact that there is simply no money left in our healthcare system to pay for all of the diseases that we would otherwise develop given all the junk food we are eating. I mean, again, to me, the situation there is very simple. It's you have less and less resources to deal with problems that are getting out of hand. And the only way you can deal with those problems would be to rely on more and more prediction, preemption, and some kind of algorithmic regulation that will allow you to keep the system running, and which would otherwise collapse. So in that sense, to me, the problem doesn't seem to be so much at the level of algorithms or big data. To me, the problem seems to lie at a much higher level of causality, and this is, I think, what we probably have to start discussing if we actually want to understand both the kind of future that awaits us, but also an alternative vision for how we can have a different kind of social organization. I mean, if you look at some of the, let me put it that way, non-neoliberal and non-capitalist deployments of algorithms today to have an alternative model of education or public transportation or healthcare, you will find plenty of examples at small level. I mean, you will find, if you look at, for example, Helsinki in Finland, you'll see that they do have an alternative to Uber. It's called Katsu Plus, and it's basically a system that relies on your smartphone to understand where you are and calculate where you might be going along with other users of that app and send you a minivan that will take all of you, collect you, and drive you to the highly personalized route where you would pay just 3 or 4 euros instead of the 20 euros you would pay to Uber. I mean, this is all great and this is all nice and we can all be celebrating it as some kind of solidarity-based cooperative platform, but of course it's clear that it's never going to scale unless we actually manage to get control over our cities, which again we're also losing for reasons that have nothing to do with algorithms or big data, right? And I think those fights will not be won. Not just without opposing the broad and neoliberal paradigm that does lead to budget cuts and does lead to the shrinking of budgets for public transportation, it also has to do with the question, what's going to happen to all the data that's being generated with our smartphones? I mean, right now, there is no alternative paradigm and there is no alternative ownership regime for that data. I mean, right now, it is collected by these companies. If you look at the deal that Uber recently struck with the city of Boston last week, what they basically said, as a matter of goodwill, they would actually give Boston the data they collect on all of the rights that they do in the city as a way to improve urban planning and ease congestion in Boston. You know, it makes Uber look somewhat nice, or at least nicer than the usual ugly image, which is entirely justified. But I'm not sure that that data belongs to Uber in the first place. Right, and I can easily imagine how other companies, and in fact there are already some that, for example, look at biking data, that actually selling that data to public administrations and cities and town halls and making good money off it. And again, I'm not sure it belongs to them. And I think that the really big questions we have to start asking, because there are clearly ways in which you can use the sensors, you can use algorithms, you can use big data to make life in the cities better. You can have better urban planning, you can have less congestion, you can have better bus system that would not rely on a centralized route that has been predetermined and is in place forever, but will be exactly of the flexible, highly personalized kind you see in Helsinki. But it's not going to happen until some key interventions are made at the level of political economy. When we do figure out how we can actually reclaim ownership over some of the sensor infrastructure which generates that data, and how we can actually claim ownership of that data itself. And how can we do it, by the way, without reducing that data to a commodity that will be sold and bought in the market, as currently is the plan for many startups in Silicon Valley and even in Davos, for whom, yes, that data exists, and yes, we can be made owners of it, but it will also have a financial value attached to it, and they want to create another market in which that data can be traded. That option I don't like either. But we are not articulating that alternative paradigm, and I think we're not articulating it because we do not fully understand the economic and political role that that data would play in either sustaining the current economic system or undermining it. And I'm not sure that we have a good grasp of what are the kind of steps and interventions that we need to make in order to make that happen. And, you know, to sort of to give away the secret, I don't think we can do it at a very small scale. I don't think we can do it as hackers, as activists, as artists. I don't think we can do it as, let alone, and probably the list of it, intellectuals or writers. I don't think that that counter program will emerge from those efforts. I mean, I think we'll have to go and capture power. And you capture power by running elections the way Syriza and Podemos run elections in Greece and Spain. I don't think it's going to happen from us having yet another Congress after Congress after Congress and, you know, having these wonderful panels as much as I love being on them every single month. You know, and unless we do articulate those issues at the level of political program, or if we actually stop focusing on algorithms, which is, again, an exciting field that I can't complain, has been great for my career, and start focusing on, you know, how do you actually get elected? And you get elected at this point by opposing a lot of financial economic processes. You know, you focus on, I'm sorry to say, the European Central Bank and not on Google. I mean, this is what animates political life today. As much as we like debating all these issues about encryption, security, big data, and algorithms, for most people, I don't think that that's really an issue, and you see it in the polls. What people care about is you know, what they have to pay in their rent and whether they're being evicted from the house that they bought with a mortgage. And unless we manage to capture those fights and run on those campaigns, I don't think that any of these data fantasies that we have in terms of articulating a counter program to the program Silicon Valley, you're never going to have them. Precisely because algorithms and big data do serve a fundamental role in sustaining the current regime. So you can, of course, go back to counterculture and start reading all these great poems to figure out what these people got wrong. And it's very easy to see what they got wrong. They never conceptualized or theorized capitalism. It's not there in the analysis. And, you know, and since they never conceptualized it, their counter-program has always been about media, has always been about expanding consciousness with new media. You know, video comes around, everybody gets excited about media. Video, some other medium comes around, the internet, everybody gets excited about that. I mean, all of that is good, is fine, but it's not exactly the kind of counter-program that will actually get you to power. Right? And I think that, yes, we can continue talking about alternative uses of algorithms and blockchain and Bitcoin to figure out how at some local level in some obscure town in Britain or France, we can have a complementary currency program that will help us decrease our reliance on the European Central Bank. But to really make it work at any level that will make any difference, you'll actually have to go and capture the central bank of a country. And you capture the central bank of a country by winning elections. So unfortunately, I don't actually think that for us at this point it's possible to articulate any kind of counter-vision to the ideology of big data, in part because the ideology of big data is just a nice euphemism for the ideology of contemporary capitalism and neoliberalism, or whatever name you want to stick on it. So in that sense, I don't think that building new institutions without questioning the underlying ownership structure of these things is going to make much sense. I mean, in the past, I foolishly toyed with the idea of promoting some kind of algorithmic auditing, you know, creating systems that would go and allow us to check the algorithms of Google or whoever runs Haus Smart City, whatever. And I think it's just delusional. I don't think it is going to get us very far. I think it's an extremely reformist kind of social democratic program that doesn't actually get you anywhere. I mean, it's not the fact that these algorithms are hidden from us that is the key issue. The key issue is that we cannot organize ourselves differently using those algorithms. And we cannot do it for reasons that have very little to do with our misunderstanding of big data and have everything to do with our lack of political organization and representation in actual structures of power. So, I mean, I can go on about this for a very long time, but again, I just want to highlight the point about counterculture. I mean, even if, and I know that the history of computing counterculture in Europe is very different from the one in America, but if you look at the crowd of people in counterculture in the late 60s, I mean, they were centrally positioned at the very sort of axis of consumption. I mean, they were attached to the primary institution of it, the whole Earth catalog. I mean, it's a catalog. The title gives away what it is. It's where people bought products. However countercultural they were, the primary mode of liberation that culture promoted was through consumption. Yes, those might have been very artisanal, you know, stoves and T-shirts, but there was no political strategy attached to it. I mean, it's obvious, and you know, if you go and listen to Stuart Brand now, I mean, he'll tell you more or less the same thing because he thinks that this is how liberation happens. It happens in the marketplace. So, I mean, I don't know. We can go and continue reading and rereading a lot of those materials. I just don't know what we are going to discover there, other than a history of failure, which we probably shouldn't repeat. So maybe I'll wrap up and we'll save some time for questions.